Morning, we're going to have a conversation, and we're going to continue in our Summer of Love series. And what we're going to do is continue to press deeper into the idea of God's love and transformation and all that He has for us. And to help us do this is the person who actually helped craft this sermon series, who actually is the brains behind the whole series. It's your very new adult ministries pastor, Pastor Joy Fishler. Will you welcome her to the stage? Woo!
Good morning,
Joy.
I didn't know we were going to have chairs.
How are you doing? Oh, you didn't know? You thought we were going to make you stand the whole time?
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
So you are relatively new here. Do you still feel new? Is it like, how long have you been here? I'm still trying to figure out if you're new or not.
Okay, I've been here for 1 month now,
Okay.
but ask me what surprises me the most.
What surprises you the most?
The fireworks are legal?
The fireworks are legal.
What?
She came from the Bay Area. Well, you got exposed to some fireworks on Thursday. I went back and forth whether or not I was going to tell this story. It has nothing to do with the sermon, just a heads up. But as you were preparing on Thursday, all of a sudden, Pastor Will, our worship pastor, runs down and says, "Oh, there's a fire." And we're like, what's going on? We're like, I don't know, it's like a super spread. Like, it's the fire of the Lord. And like, no, it was actually, there was a literal fire back here behind us. And then all of a sudden, here comes the police department, the fire department, and boom, no property damage done. Thank you to our firefighters, our first responders. Woo! So you've been here for a month, and again, you were going back and forth for a while because you came from the Bay Area where fireworks are not legal, and you're here and you're adjusting to the heat and the fireworks and a different pace of life. But you were driving back and forth for a while until as your house was getting redone, buying that whole thing, moving your family here. But the rumor is, according to some members of the Fishler family, you're not what at least what your husband would call the best driver. Like, is this like some sort of like husband sexism here, or is this like, is you looking over at him? So what's the story on that?
Okay, let's clear that up. I am a great driver. In the past, I have driven with a little bit of angst, side of judgment, a little bit of spitfire.
Oh.
Something I've struggled with ongoing.
How much spitfire?
It depends how irritated I am.
Well, tell us more.
So if you know anything about the East Bay, there's this road called Ignacio Valley Road. And it's almost like a curse word. It's like, Kyle, stop being such an Ignacio Valley Road.
Okay.
It's 7 miles from Clayton, where I lived, to Walnut Creek, where I worked. And sometimes that 7 miles could take 45, 55 minutes. It's pretty, and if you do that a couple times a day, it kind of gets to you. And then you have, Yahoo next to you watching TikTok videos while he's driving. Or, when you finally do get to move, someone's like 10 miles under the speed limit, and then they're brake checking you because they're passive aggressive. All those things that happen that kind of get me riled up, and I'm like, can you just go? So there was this one particular day, and maybe it wasn't just one day, maybe it was, I'll never tell. But it was, I was a little more irritated than usual. And I was driving up the hill with my children in the car. I'm like, look to the right, kids, a deer, as I made this hand gesture to my left so they didn't see it. And,
so hold on, wait. So Pastor Joy is driving to work, and on the way, she is lying to her children about animals that may or may not be there while making avian hand gestures to the person next to you. Well done, Pastor Joy. We didn't talk about this in your interview.
But you did say, hey, I know this Sunday, do you want to talk about your worst sin? I'm like, sure, let's do that. Let's start there.
Yeah, we wish that was your worst sin. Sorry. This is a safe place. We love you. So then what happened next? Did your kids see you? Like what?
Okay, so that's kind of one story. But there's another story where my kids weren't with me, and I did something similar, and
the avian hand gestures.
Maybe. I'm not going to say it,
There's children in the room.
There's children in the room. I waved.
I waved?
Yeah. That's what the hand gesture is, Kyle.
Oh, okay.
So I pulled into this parking lot of a grocery store, which is not the greatest parking lot. And I was so not okay. I was so not kind. And I sat there in the parking lot and I just thought, what is wrong with me? I love people. I love Jesus. Aren't I a new creation? Like, hasn't the old passed away? Like, what is wrong with me? And I just sat there and took some time, and in this still small voice, I heard, you don't love like I do. And I just sat there with all of the angst and the anger just diffused, just convicted. And I just sat there and I thought, I don't love like you do. I love better than some. So I decided in that moment.
Go on.
That I decided that I was going to pray in the car and just ask, Jesus, can I love you more? Can I love your people more? Can I have more of your heart? Because if you did all these amazing things, and you said that we will do greater things than you, and here I am over here waving at people in the car, I'm the problem.
Yeah.
So what part is my responsibility and what part is his responsibility? And I think he already took care of his part, so I'm the problem.
Wow. And then what? So you're having this thing where you're like, okay, I don't love the way you love. Well, again, one of the ways we say, well, at least I'm better than that person, right? I mean, that's what.
At least I love more than Kyle does.
Well, no one's going to disagree with that. But I also got to think it's a shot to your identity, right? Like, you are known, again, you're the loving one. Even your neighbors, your friends who aren't part, you are known as someone who loves big, loves deeply, loves wholeheartedly. And now there's this moment where you realize, but I still don't love the way he does. So he starts with that, and then does God just leave you there, or what happens next?
So I made a choice. I went after it. Day in, day out, that was the prayer of my heart for months. I was relentless. It was not okay with me, how my heart was feeling. And it must have been, I don't know, a couple months down the road. And I was sitting in a red light, and there was a car in front of me, beat up kind of car, had a couple men in the front and 3 women in the back. And, by our cultural standards, not the most beautiful people. But there was this old lady in the middle, and her face, she was looking off to the right. And I saw the side of her profile, and it was dark and wrinkly. And I got so swept up. I just thought, oh, you're so beautiful. Like, everything about her face, like, my heart was just gooey and oozing. And I was like, you are so beautiful. And I looked at everyone in the car, and just from person to person, it was like I was seeing them for who they were and for nothing else. And the light turned green, and I thought, what was that? What just happened? Something just happened. And I realized that my heart had been changing. I just hadn't noticed it until that moment. And what's crazy is that day, 3-4 years ago, that hasn't faded. It's only grown, and that is still the prayer of my heart. And it's almost like every time I pray, it's like a little grain of salt gets inserted. And it's like little by little by little, and it's just amazing. It doesn't fade. Like, I love people.
Oh, I love that the same spitfire you had in angst is also the same spitfire that you had going after it with God, right? There's this feisty, this drive, but I also love the juxtaposition of the way you love, waving at your neighbor, to this supernatural way that God changes you. Throughout this process of praying and saying, God, I don't love like you do, but I want to do it better, and not just better than my neighbor, I want to do it better than I can do it. What scriptures did God use to kind of guide that spiritual journey?
It's 2 Corinthians 3:18. And I love the music that Will chose today. Good job, Will. And all of us with unveiled faces, seeing the glory of the Lord as though reflected in a mirror, are being transformed into his likeness from glory to glory, which comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. And the definition of glory is greatness, majestic, I magnificent. And you know, how often do we ever say to ourselves, I want to be full of greatness. I want to be magnificent. I want to be the best version of me I can be. We just don't think of ourselves that way. In fact, I think one of our societal sins is the fact that we are so quick to know what's wrong with us instead of being able to stand in who we are and be okay with, you know, we're either overconfident or underconfident. And I just think that there's something wrong with that. Like, let's be who we're created to be, and let's say who we are, and let's walk in that.
Hold on, I don't think people heard that. What I hear you saying is that there's something inside of us that struggles with the realization that God's power, his majesty, his glory lives in us and lives through us. And as we live for his glory and lift him up, it actually does something inside of us. Why do you think it's hard for us? Why do you think it's a cultural, why do you think it's easier for most of us to focus on what's wrong with us instead of what's right with us?
Well, I think there's a couple ways to answer that question, and one of it is just our society. It's kind of how we've been formed. But I want to go back to Matthew 7:7, and he says, "Ask and it will be given to you; search and you will find; knock and the door will be opened." And I can't help but think that there's a connection there of having to ask to be, Jesus, can I go to the next level of glory? Can I go to the next level of greatness? Can I love like you? Can I be more like you? And I just think that that is the key from going to glory to glory to glory, is that we just have to ask for it. And I think that the fact that we can be so comfortable being, you know, I'm generous. I give up my time. I'm a good person. And we think that we just kind of get comfortable as is but there's no scriptural reference to say you've arrived. There's always another level. There's always more to love. There's always more. And I just think that, we should ask for it.
Well, it's interesting when you talk about what we should ask for in the asking piece, because the 2 Corinthians passage, again, about being transformed from glory to glory with unveiled faces is a reference, I know you know this, to Exodus 33. And for folks who don't know, the story in Exodus 33 is God is leading the people through the promised land, or through the wilderness, and they're about to get to the promised land. And what happens is God says, here's the promised land. I've rescued you from sin and slavery. You've gone through the wilderness, and now the promised land is there, but I'm not gonna go with you, because you're a bunch of stiff-necked, stubborn people who don't want to listen. He's essentially said, if you don't want to listen to me, I'm going to shut up and let you do it yourself. And Moses says, no, I won't go without you. He says, I won't go into the land without your promise, without your glory. And he says, I want to see your glory and I want to experience your presence. And it's crazy because Moses says, I won't do it without you. I won't do it without your presence. I won't go, again, for us, I'm not gonna go to that next business venture. I'm not going to that next relationship. I'm not going to that next stage of my life. Wherever I go, I will not go without you. But it's crazy that he has to ask for it. And it blows my mind here that he asked for it. And I think many of us are afraid to ask God for more. And I'm curious, has that been your experience? And if so, why do we not have the courage that Moses has that says, I want more of your presence, more of your glory, more of your love? Why don't people do that?
I think that there's also this fear that kind of lingers of, are we going to be weird? Are we going to be one of those people who are like dancing on the chairs? Or am I going to lose part of me? And really the answer to that is you just become a better version of you. You're not going to be the weird person. Unless you're a weird person, then I don't know.
Sorry, I'm back with you. It's interesting. Moses has this thing where he goes and experiences the glory of God, and it's so radiant through him that he actually has to have a veil over his face because it's so bright that it's actually blinding to the people. It's like when people see me swimming in the pool. It's like blinding and they got to shade their eyes. But he's wearing a veil, but again, there's a veil to cover
Lucky
his
Kelly.
face. So my wife can testify to that. Can I get an amen, love? Where's I going with this? Oh, the veil. But it's interesting. But now, in the new covenant, because of what Jesus has done, we can actually see his glory without the veil. And it's interesting. We'll get to the torn veil in a minute. But there's a sense that division between us and God and us and other people are not there. But he had to ask for it. And it's interesting, that picture of it, because I think people are afraid to ask for it because they don't have a vision of what it looks like. They don't have a mentor, a friend, or a picture of what Jesus is. They don't have a sense of what that would even look like. They think, oh, I've arrived, I'm good, and they don't have a sense of it. But I think there's some people who do have a vision of it, and that's what makes them afraid, because they're afraid if I ask and don't get it, it either means there's something wrong with me, or even worse, God doesn't answer my prayer, and then there's some reason that God doesn't love me as much as he loves everyone else. And I think we're afraid. We're afraid to fail, we're afraid to be special, we're afraid to be different, and we don't have a vision of what deeper places of God's love may look like in us, and the way we treat people, the way we shine God's love, the way we lift him up. And I think that's the thing, is we're afraid to go from glory to glory because we don't have a vision, or we're afraid of what that vision may be.
Solid word.
So as we're there, we've talked about this transformation of loving like God. We've talked about that you've got to ask for it. We've talked about what it may look like. And it's interesting you talk about your experience with those people in the car. You just saw them differently. I had a similar experience when I was a freshman in college. I came into this new school, no friends, no nothing, and I had this weird combination of insecurity and arrogance. I think many of us think about insecurity and arrogance as opposite sides of the spectrum. You have really insecure people over here, you have really arrogant people over there, but I think for me it was the same, is I was insecure because I didn't know if I was special, but there was this arrogance, thought there was something better about me. And I had this moment of praying, and I'll tell you where I was sitting. I was at my desk in my freshman dorm room, and it was though, again, the power, the glory, it's just as though God came and sat in that room, put his hands on my back, but then he put his heart in my heart, and what happened was there was a sense of God's glory and majesty, power and presence. And what happens is that then he said, hey, Kyle, go on a walk. And I was like, I don't want to leave this place. This awestruck connection that was amazing. Like, why would I ever leave this? And I started to walk. I realized as I walked, as I saw people different, I saw them differently. I didn't see them as a competition. I didn't see them as people to judge me. I didn't judge them. There was this place where I just saw, again, their just innate sense that they were made in God's image, that they are inherently lovable and valuable, and it just changed. And I went from conversation to conversation. I literally did a walk all around the social area there, and I realized I saw every single person different, and it was a level of freedom from my insecurity, but also my judgmentalness that I had never had before. And it really came first, not actually by practicing how to love people. I actually had to receive it from God so that I could give it to others. And I'm afraid so many of us, we try to love people. Again, last week I talked about loving people who are hard to like, loving, whether it be an in-law or whether it be someone who annoys you. And we try to do it in our own strength. And we're trying hard. But when we don't first receive that love from Jesus, we don't know what real love is, and we don't know how to give it away to other folks. Yeah. But you've experienced that. So I'm wondering if you could lead us in that. I mean, lead us in a prayer, or give us an encouragement to say, as people are listening to this conversation, and it does sound kind of weird, it sounds a little ethereal, like being transformed by God's love and grace and glory. These are big words that we're not familiar with. Would you kind of land the plane here for us this morning before we transition to communion and say, what would that look like? What kind of prayer would you want us to pray? Well, because you've been there, lead us in that for a moment.
So you are invited. We're going to pray together the prayer that I prayed that day, and going to challenge you to pray it for every day, because we get to go from glory to glory to glory, and you are invited no matter your age or how mature you are. There is something more. It's endless. And so this morning, if you would just close your eyes, humor me as a active receiving. If you would just put one hand on your heart and maybe one hand out in a receiving position. Father, you are here. We thank you. We thank you for the gift of your Son, Jesus, and the gift of your Holy Spirit, and the beauty of the Trinity and what that means for us. Jesus, I ask right now that you would fill our hearts to a capacity that would love you more. Jesus, that we would fall more in love with you. That you would reveal more of yourself, more of your personality, more of your character. And that you would give us a deep love for people, all people. Every race, every nationality, every cousin. Jesus, that you would help us to love like you do. That you would give us eyes to see what you are doing and ears to hear your voice. That we would move with you, that we would love like you, and that we would transform our homes and our communities. Thank you that we are called to be more like you. And there is a never-ending fountain of your love and your grace and your goodness. We celebrate you this morning and we say thank you. In Jesus'